This video is to help with the last few gridded response for the practice EOG. This will be numbers 12, 13, and 14. So for number 12, the question is the one about the kitchen with the dimensions and needing to find out how many tiles would cover the kitchen floor. So if we draw a quick picture, we know that the dimensions are 11.5 feet by 9.5 feet. Now, we know each of the tiles needs to be 1/2 foot, so we're trying to essentially figure out how many tiles go into this or divide. So again, because we're dividing fractions, the easiest thing to do is turn these into improper fractions. So 11/2 is the same thing as 23 over 2. And then 9/2 is the same thing as 19 over 2. So then we have a rectangle. I can write it a little bigger. That's 23 over 2 by 19 over 2. So each dimension needs to fit 1/2 inch tiles. So each dimension you need to divide by 1/2 because we need these little squares to each be 1/2 inch and fit all the way across. That'll give us our length and our width, and that'll then tell us the area, which will tell us how many tiles we need. So if it doesn't seem intuitive right away, what you would typically do is divide each dimension by 1/2, which then would be 23 over 2 times 2 over 1. The 2's would cancel out and it'd be 23, which makes sense that if there are 23 halves, 1/2 should go into 23 halves 23 times. So then that would mean that your length is then 23 of those tiles, and then the width is 19 of the tiles. You could see that you would do the same thing with that width. So using this, 23 times 19, if you do the math out, because you won't have a calculator, you would see that it would be 437 is your area. So that means it would take 437 of those 1/2 inch tiles to fit in that area, in that kitchen area. So we converted these to improper fractions, saw how many times 1/2 went into each dimension, and then found the total area to represent those tiles. Number 13. Let's see. Okay, this one is just remembering how to do order of operations. So I'm going to write it out here so we can look at it. So -2 times the sum of 4 squared plus 1/2 squared. So we always want to do exponents first because the exponents are within the parentheses. So then you know to go to the parentheses after that. So 4 squared is 16. 1/2 squared, 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4. You could also write 0.25, that's fine. Then you do what's in the parentheses. So -2 times 16 1/4. So then if you multiply by -2, you would just double the 4th and double the 16. So then you would get 16 times 2, -2 is 32, and 1/2. You could also write it as -32.5 as well. Either way would work. So, but to do your gridded response, you're going to want to do that or convert this to 65 over 2 because you need an improper fraction if you were to have a gridded response. And the last one, number 14. Let's see. Okay, so Brett makes a scale drawing of a rectangular room in his house. The actual length of the room is 12 4/5 of a foot. The scale used to make this drawing was 1/4 of an inch to 1 foot. So we want to know the length in inches of the room in the drawing. So very similar to some of the other ones we have been doing, we're going to set up our proportion. So if we know that we have something that is 12 4/5 and we need to put it in a proportion, we're going to go ahead and make it an improper fraction. So 12 times 5 is 60, plus 4 is 64. So that's the improper fraction we're going to be using. And just like some of the other scale models we've done, we're going to use inches to feet. And And we know that we were told that 1/4 of an inch lines up with 1 foot. That's supposed to be 1 and 4, not a Y. 1/4 of an inch over 1 foot. And then we know that number in feet, so that needs to go on the bottom. And then our X is going to be right here. So we're going to cross multiply, and X is going to equal 64/5 times 1/4, which is then 64/20. You just multiply straight across. Don't need a common denominator. Once when you do that, you can divide top and bottom by 4 to reduce it, which would then be 16/5, which would be a perfectly acceptable answer. If you want to do it as a decimal, 5 goes into 16 3 times, and then you're left with 1/5 left over, which you know is 0.2. So either one of these in a gridded response would be acceptable. And that's it for the gridded response.